going to kick it off our meeting today. We've got a lot of awesome content to share with you. It's going to be all about Tableau Server or Tableau Online. I really feel like they're kind of interchangeable. The two tools, they're really basically the same thing. It's just Tableau Online is hosted by Tableau, and you as an administrator don't have to worry about like maintaining servers or doing upgrades or things like that. And Tableau Server gives you the joy of having to maintain servers and stuff like that. So, but the functionality is the same. So whether you have Tableau Server or Tableau Online, you're going to get a lot of really fantastic content today. So, welcome. All right. So, quick introduction to the Wisconsin Tableau User Group. It is a combo Tableau user group. Myself, along with a few other people, Olga and Patrick DeLugash and Josh Connor, we lead the Milwaukee Tableau user group. And then Patrick McCormick with Nicole Kraft and a variety of other people lead the Madison Tableau user group. And together, we lead the Wisconsin Tableau user group. It has always been virtual. It's meant to kind of touch cities within Wisconsin that don't have their own Tableau user groups, but want a Tableau community. So it's always been virtual, will continue to be virtual. And I feel like this is we just hit our second year mark. So welcome. So the agenda for today. We're kicking it off now. We're currently in that, doing that. And in just a moment, we're going to poll you guys. We want to understand a little bit more about our audience members. After that, we're going to dive right into the topic for the day, which is Tableau Server. And we're really covering all sorts of skill levels. So Tableau Server and Tableau Online offer a lot of really cool stuff, whether you're a beginner, to the platform, or like just an interactor and viewer, or intermediate, advanced capabilities and levels. If maybe you're an explorer or a creator within Tableau, and then if you're an administrator, maybe you're thinking like, I need Jedi level skills. You're going to find all of that here today. And then we just have some kind of like housekeeping announcements, and then we're going to give away some prizes. During our presentation for the day, you can ask the presenters questions, but we're going to ask that you do that in the Q&A panel, not in the chat, because the chat makes it really hard to keep track of everything. So the Q&A panel is just another button in Zoom, and you'll bring that up, and that's where you'll ask questions, okay? Great. So we're going to kick things off with an audience profile. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to drop the link in the chat because nobody wants to type that nasty thing out. But also, if you would rather, you can take your phone and open up the camera and point it at this QR code. And your phone, if it's, I think most smartphones do this now, will give you like a little banner that you can click on, and it'll open it up. And it works really well on a mobile device. So whatever is your preference, the link is in the chat, or you can, use your phone to read that QR code. I'm just going to give people a second to grab that. And I'm going to switch over to our wonderful screen. So in just a moment, I'm going to start the poll. I'm actually going to turn it over to Olga Rosales to walk us through the questions, and she's just going to dictate to me when to next slide, please. So we're in it together, but in just a moment, you'll see that first question appear. Are you ready, Olga?
I am ready.
Here we go.
Okay, so we switched to polls to find out more about all of you. Personally, I like going around the room and spending an hour and everybody says who they are and what they do, but I was overruled. So, okay, let's see. So we have some Tableau administrators, server side. I started out as never having had to do any Tableau administration, moving to a new job and a new position. Now I'm kind of into it with Tableau Online. So it's never a waste to kind of learn what's capable and take back what you have to know to your Tableau server administrators. Okay, we have no server. All right, so looks like most of us are not. And glad we have some with us. Next question, please. I'm going to attend the Tableau Conference. So incredibly lucky that it's online, that it is free. For the Americas, it's going to be November 9th through the 11th. I personally can't wait until we get back to an in-person conference. And at that time, I will highly recommend that you all try to go. Okay, what Tableau Conference? Yes, November 9th through 11th. Just look it up, Tableau Conference TC21. Okay, next question. Yay, everybody's going. Are you interested in presenting at the Wisconsin Tug, Milwaukee Tug, the Madison Tug? What? You see that no is in little tiny letters? I tried to make it smaller, but I couldn't. What? Yes, and I have an idea. Okay, that one person needs to reach out. And yes, but I need a topic. We'll work with you too. Oh, we've got lots of topics. I'm afraid of people, so am I. I am too. So we can work with you too. So, okay, there's a little bit. So there's so many advantages, I think, to presenting. The first thing is you're going to get a lot of wonderful Tableau friends because everybody's going to come up to you and say, wow, that was really great. I also have this issue, or how did you do this? And yeah, I just think it's very valuable to do. So, okay, so everybody that said yes, something, you need to reach out to us if whether you're in the area or not, right? Our presenters are from all over. So we really have to work on that 51 down there. Okay, next question, please. What is the most difficult part of your job as it pertains to BI? And you can choose multiple here. You might have two that compete. You might say all of them, and then I'd say we should start talking about a new job for you. Yeah, data, isn't that what they say, that percentage thing, how long we take cleaning up the data. Okay, so it looks like the lowest is managing timelines of communication. So I need to reach out to you guys because that's probably my hardest. Yeah, so data, looks like data and then business requirements. So I would say that is definitely hard to do. You know, there's not much that we could do here to help you with cleaning up the data, I don't think, besides like talking about different tools. But gathering business requirements, absolutely. I think that there are people that have found ways to do it. And, you know, that's something that we've had in different groups to talk about. Getting trust and adoption, that's become very, very top of mind with everybody. So I guess this is just to not be lonely when we talk about our problems. And next slide. I can't wait to go back to the office. So our team, I have a small team. We have 3 people at our company, and we have decided that we love working from home, and we don't want to have a set day, but we'll come in when we need to, when it makes sense. So, okay, looks like I believe nobody is, some people are already there. I forgot to put it, and I can't wait to go back. I guess that was just me and my thinking that I never want to go back. Okay. Yeah, it's crazy, crazy world, but I I think unfortunately that happened, but it really did bring a lot of opportunities for all of us. Okay, and the next slide. Favorite streaming show. And this is where we learn the most about you. Yeah. And there's so many to choose from. It was really hard. Ted Lasso, yep, Ozark, Dark. I have never seen the Squid Game, but I've seen a lot of memes about it and stuff.
Oh my God, it's so good.
Is it?
It is so good.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
And then
Ozark
you
is
start
the
going down the
winner.
rabbit hole of the different Squid Game theories,
Really?
and you're lost for hours, and then it's 2 o'clock
Okay.
in the morning. You know
All
what I mean?
right. Awesome. Ooh, great bit and backup. Oh yeah. Yeah, well, I guess what we should do is maybe have this be on every one, and then we'll have some bake-offs for the top ones, and we'll all have things to do when we're not making dashboards. Well, thank you, everyone. It was really good to get to know you, and I'm looking forward to learning all about servers now. So back to you, Brandy.
Awesome. Thank you, Olga. That was just absolutely wonderful. The chat is just like blowing up with people talking about the shows, and Chris suggested the Great British Baking Show, or Great British Bake Off. I'm sorry. I feel like that might be different. Either way, people are loving it. So fantastic. That was a lot of fun. Thank you guys so much for participating. If you guys did respond yes to like you'd like to present, reach out to me, in the chat window. I'll just grab your name and I'll reach out to you later and we'll just talk about it. Like, it's super no pressure, but it's a great opportunity. Okay, so on to the main show. Our topic for today is Tableau Server / online for all skill levels. So we're going to have a variety of people speaking today. And they're going to showcase lots of cool things that like Tableau Server can do. Again, feel free to ask them questions in the Q&A panel. There might be time for questions at the end of their presentations. If not, we're going to hopefully get back to you just in that chat window. We can answer questions. So yeah, ask any questions that you have. The first presenter that we have today is Sam Hearn. He is going to kind of give an introduction, beginner level overview of Tableau Online. So I'm going to turn it over to Sam.
Great, thanks, Brandy. Let me share my screen. Oh, here we go. Yep, so this presentation is mostly geared towards individuals who are just starting off their Tableau journey. So I just wanted to show you around. So I have a Tableau Online development sandbox project. After I finish talking, I'll share how you can get one for free. It's free of charge. I actually found out about this when I was preparing for the last talk at the Madison Tug. It's kind of a development sandbox account. So you can play around with things, you can create sample visualizations, play around with connections, all of that. It's great. So like I said, this is Tableau Online. It's very similar to Tableau Server. The only difference is Tableau, the company, hosts it, so you don't have to host it. For Tableau Server, there are a couple options that you can have. Well, actually, maybe 3. So you can install Tableau Server on Windows, and that used to be the only way you could do it. A few years ago, they added the ability to install it on a Linux machine, and you can also install it on a cloud instance as well. So there are a good number of options. I'll just show you a little bit around the UI. So for this is the most up-to-date version of Tableau. That's what's available on this Tableau Online account. So I have a few projects here. One project is sample project, named because I created a bunch of sample workbooks in it. And so from here, you can see all the projects, and projects are what house the different workbooks. So the different Tableau workbooks. You might have a project for a specific department in your company, or it might be a specific focus. You can also nest projects within one another. So if you had like maybe, so I work at American Family and I'm in the life insurance company. So if you wanted to have like a further breakdown life insurance into the different areas within that, you can also nest projects that way. I didn't nest projects here though, just for simplicity. But if we go into one of the projects, so let's go into the sample project, and you can see the workbooks here. You can also see that there's a favorites icon here. And when you first start out, I prefer the list view. Some people do like the grid view because you do get to see a sample of the visualizations, like a snapshot. I think it gets a little too bloated for my liking, so I actually like the list view. So you can switch back and forth. You can also filter. So if you know who the owner is, you can select the owner from the drop down. You can also filter on when it was modified, and you can also filter on favorites. So if you click this, then it will just show the 2 workbooks that I have starred. So that's what you can do with the filter here. If we want to go into one of these visualizations, so let's look at this one. So this is names over time. So this page gives you an overview of the worksheets and dashboards that are in the workbook. So in this dashboard, or excuse me, in this workbook, I have 2 worksheets. One is names over time, and one is the name Susan by state. So I'm going to click on one of these to show you what this looks like. So you can see I plotted some names over time. So you can see like Michael, ever prevalent name. It had a great popularity during this time, and kind of it's still used, but not as widely. You can see Susan, which is my mom's name, had quite a peak in the 1950s when she was born, and then it kind of just went downhill from there. So it was kind of a fun thing to plot. In Server, you can do a lot of great things that you can also do in desktop. So you can look at underlying data if you are an end user. So I'm in the end user view right now. I'm not editing this. So if you had a particular data point that you wanted, or some data points, you can actually select it, you can hover over it, then you can click this icon, which is the view data icon. And if you click that, you can see the summary data, and you can also look at all of the underlying data in this workbook, or in the selection that you selected. So you can easily see outliers if you have a visualization that something doesn't quite look right. You can easily, from Tableau Server or online, just go and see what is the underlying data under this point. You can also do a lot of other things. So for instance, you can have alerts. That means that if there is something, some aggregate measure goes above or below a certain value, you can be alerted of that, and you'll receive an email at the frequency of your choosing. You can also go and you can subscribe to a view. So for instance, if you know that this data is updated once a day at 8 a.m., you can have a subscription set a little bit after that. Or you can be fancy and you can, if it's an extract, you can set the frequency of when data refreshes. So assuming that your data set gets updated programmatically, and when it's refreshed, then that means that it's up to date, then it will send it out. So you can do all this, and then you can choose format, and you can subscribe yourself, you can subscribe others to the view, and so on. let's see, you can edit from this window, and I'll show you that in a second. Sharing it. So I do this all the time to link to the different visualizations. So you click this, and then it pops up a shareable link. So you copy the link and you share it to whoever should have access to it. Download, you can download a lot of different info. So similar to what I did before, which was downloading the data points, you can also download the data points from here by clicking on data, and it will save it in a CSV format. So you can open it up in Excel, look at it. You can also save it as a Tableau workbook, so that if you have Tableau desktop, you can edit that in a different program and not online, if you prefer to do that. And yeah, comments. So if there are comments on the viz, you can look at that. You can see what your audience finds helpful, what your audience would like to see, and all of that. You can web edit here. So if you click edit, it will show you a view similar to what's in desktop, and Tableau has done a good job with getting the functionality pretty much aligned between desktop and server. So there probably are some differences, but most of the functionality is available. And so you can you can drag and drop pills, you can create workbooks, you can look at the data source and everything. And let's see, so I did that. And all right, and then because this is a Sandbox account and I am essentially an admin on this account, there's some admin specific icons that I wouldn't normally see. For instance, in the American Family Tableau project, I'm not an admin, so I wouldn't see these, but you can see the different jobs and if they completed, if they failed, what the failure was, and all of that. Settings, there's site status, there's a site status option and all of that. But that's essentially what I wanted to show. Are there any questions?
Thank you, Sam. That was just absolutely wonderful. I think the navigation, can always be sometimes difficult, and there's so many relationships between workbooks and data sources and workbooks and projects and all that. You've made it really approachable and easy to understand. So thank you. And yeah, I feel like the feature that you showed about like being able to subscribe to something after the data has already been refreshed, like that is something that's new. At least it's not in the version that I'm currently on. So I'm super excited about that. So thanks for showing that off. We do have at least one question, but so I'll pose that to you. Okay, we just have another one come in. Anyway, first question, has Tableau implemented a solution to make data refresh based alerts in case there are delays or a schedule doesn't run?
I am not sure off the top of my head. Let me see. So I did make an alert on one of these visuals. Let me look what I did. So if you click create, let's see what. So you have to click on the numeric access. You click create above once frequently as possible. Yeah, I don't think it's possible at this point. Yeah, unfortunately.
Right. I wonder if it's less about an alert on the workbook, because the alert on the workbook is going to be like if a certain metric is achieved. And that's going to be very specific to your dashboard or your visual. But alerts based on like data refresh, I believe if you have the data management add-on, it comes with something called data catalog, and that starts to allow you to like use data quality warnings, which will appear and alert you if there's an issue. Now, I will say if a data source is scheduled to be refreshed and it fails, the owner of that data source does get an email. So it's not really alerts that like anybody can sign up for, but those are, I think, a few options, right? Like you'll get an email if you're the owner and it fails, or if you can set up like the data quality warnings, and that will be visible to anybody who goes to use your workbook. That like, hey, this data might be stale.
Right. Right.
Worth checking out, but great question. Yeah, I think we've got time for some more. So how do you create extracts, and how do you check the source of the extract if it's created by someone else?
Yeah, so extracts, so let me pull up, I think the names over time. Am I using an extract for this? Yeah, I'm using an extract for that. So this is actually a Google BigQuery source. So that's where it's actually coming from. And then I set up an extract to actually cache the results essentially. As far as viewing, whether or not it's an extract, you can kind of see if you hover over it, it says that it's an extract, and it gives you an icon as well. That's the extract icon. And so, yeah, you can see some information about it. So if you click edit connection, for this example, I do have the authentication. I did set it up within the Sandbox environment. So it did save, or at least cache, my username and password for my Gmail account. But if there were any other specific things that you could edit, you would also be able to see it here. I do know that, so for whatever reason on Tableau Online, it doesn't give you the option of creating an extract for a file-based resource. And I think that I discovered that at my previous talk, and I think it had to deal with performance, and Tableau Online has other things that make it performant, so it didn't need to create an extract. But on the AmFam Tableau server, it does allow you to create text-based extracts, and you can actually go in and look at the data. You can look at where the extract, like the actual data source is saved, so the Excel file or the CSV file, and you can see the data from there. So I think, did that answer your question?
I feel like yes. I think a few things to note. The edit connection window that you showed, it's really only an option for the owner of the data source or like an admin. Also, I think there's a lot of like administrative settings that your particular server administrator can set. So I think Rhonda, you had mentioned, right, it doesn't seem like there's an option to create a new extract under the new button. That might be because they don't have like web editing turned on, or maybe you're on a certain version that doesn't have web editing of data sources. But really, a data source can either be an extract or a live connection. And so you might be looking for like creating a new data source, for example. But thank you so much, Sam. That was just absolutely wonderful. I really appreciate it. And if anybody has other questions for Sam, feel free to, either post them in the Q&A or in the chat window. But that was just wonderful. Thank you so much.
Yep. Yeah, and just to follow up too, I navigated to kind of where you can see a little bit more information about that. So you have to enter the edit view, and if you go to the data source, and you can see some connection options that were selected, so you can look at it from here. And you can also look at, for instance, this is a BigQuery data source, so you can see what the query was and like what the project is and all of that. So you can, but yeah, if you have any other questions, I'll do my best. And then I'll also post the link for that free Sandbox environment as well.
Thank you. Okay, so we are going to be moving on to our second presenter of the day, who's going to cover some intermediate features. And I think really pick up the ball that Sam just kind of passed. And so I'm going to turn over to Chris Patrick, who is an old colleague of mine. Take it away, Chris.
Yeah, thank you, Brandy. Happy to be here. So I'm Chris Patrick. I'm a principal business intelligence engineer at Continuous Technologies, and we're a Milwaukee-based technology and consulting firm specializing in BI and enterprise data management, all that fun stuff. I've personally spent the last 10 years in financial services. That's where I know Brandy from, and mainly working with Tableau, SQL, Python, Alteryx, all those common greatest hits tools. So for the intermediate session, I'll be showing how to work with some of the new and improved features that are on server for quickly and easily cleaning and transforming data, and then even picking up on that web edit capability to build out a dashboard without having to use Tableau Desktop at all. So should be a pretty good session, and a nice pickup from what Sam was showing previously. So yeah, let's get started. So for today's demo, I wanted to work with something a little bit more fun than the boring stock and finance data that I work with all the time. So since I'm a total nerd, one of the personal projects I've been working on is analyzing all the messages that me and my friends have sent in a group chat that we've had since 2017. So this chat was on Facebook Messenger, or still is on Facebook Messenger. And like I said, it's been the same 4 people since 2017. And to get this data, I actually requested all of my data from Facebook as an export, which I would encourage you to do because it is huge and terrifying, but that is beside the point. So the chat data actually came out as HTML files. And this particular chat was 12 different files, and each one was about 1 million lines long. So it was 12 million lines of nasty HTML data. So I wrote a Python script to parse out the core data, saved it into a database, CSV. And yeah, just kind of wanted to call that out because like we saw in the poll, cleaning data and getting data is always going to be the most painful part of all this. So yeah, even though the data is a little bit different than normal demo data, I think it can be kind of fun. So just to show kind of where we're starting from, right now this is built off of one data set, group messages, and if we just go in and take a quick look, we have 100,000 messages that were sent, we have who sent them, and when they were sent, and just typical Tableau demo kind of stuff. We can look at the data in all sorts of fun ways. We can see that in the last 4.5 years, the longest we've ever gone without talking was 71 hours, which is also kind of sad, but here we are. We can look at it by day of week, total by hour. I even brought in some sentiment analysis on who's the most happy, who's the least happy, shall we say, and we can look at that over time. So overall, it's a pretty robust data set. But one thing that is in there, that is in the data set that I haven't built out a viz for, is the reactions. So if you're familiar with group chats and all that, when someone posts a message, you can react to it. So it's whether it's a thumbs up, a heart, a laugh icon, we have all these emojis. And since there's 4 people, we can have up to 4 reactions per message. But in typical data fashion, these come in as columns. Not all the messages have reactions. If one person can be the first reactor, and then there can be another person who reacts after that. So it's really hard to sort of get a view of, okay, what are the most popular emojis that we're using? Who, thumbs up, who does the thumbs up the most? Who does the thumbs down the most? Things like that with the data in this format. So what I'm going to do is actually use Tableau Flow, or we'll create a new flow. And if you've used Tableau Prep, it's basically Prep, but in server. And if you haven't used Tableau Prep, this is a really, really powerful way to clean, transform data on the fly without having to, I wouldn't have to change my ETL script. I wouldn't have to write a SQL view. I don't have to use Alteryx, anything like that. So by creating a new flow, I connected to my data source. We can see it pulls in a preview of the data, typical chat data for the interest of privacy. And so you guys don't have to read my messages. I will be excluding those columns from the rest of the analysis. So real quickly, we can just say, hey, we don't want those columns and filter them out. So then next up, what I want to do is pivot these 4 columns to be rows. So we can add a new step. And here are all the different options that we can do. So we can clean data, we can aggregate data, join, union, we can do all sorts of fun stuff. But in this case, I want to pivot it. So as that loads here, we can see we have about 93,000 rows that matches. And what Tableau is looking for is it's asking, hey, what columns do you want to pivot from columns to rows? So let's scroll over. We want to do reaction 1, 2, 3, and 4. So literally just drag and drop those in. And now as it processes that, you can see that our row count went from 93,000 to 374,000. So it took, for every 1 row, we now have 4 rows approximately. And then now we can do a little more cleaning of that data. So let's add another step here. The reason I want to clean this a little bit further is 2 reasons. One, 98% of the rows don't have a reaction because not every message is getting reacted to, and not every message has 4 reactions. So the first step is we can use its filter values, and I'll actually just do length of the reaction column. I'll say that that's greater than 3. So as soon as I hit apply here, we'll see our row count go way down. So now we're filtered down to only the rows that have reactions. So now the next step is I want to parse out what the emoji is and who sent it. So I basically want to take this column and split. And I happen to know that there's some messy data in here, so we'll do it a certain way. So to get the emoji, we'll create a new calculated field. We'll say left of reaction, and we want the first character. And then just to make sure that worked, as soon as we hit apply, real time, we can kind of see the emojis coming on through. So we'll save that one, and then we'll create one more field here to parse out who sent it. So we can see it goes by sender 2, 4, so on and so forth. So we'll create a reactor field, and like I said, a little bit of black magic here, but I'll be using one of the regex expressions to parse out that sender. So let's see if I can get this right. We want a group of characters that is not A to Z, or A to Z capital, 4029, or space. And we want to replace that with nothing. See if that worked. Yep, and now we get our sender 1, 2, 3, and 4. So now, this edit field is going to be exactly the same as what you get in Tableau Desktop when you're writing a field. So you have all the same functionality. If we wanted to do aggregations, if we wanted to do string manipulation, if we wanted to filter date time, so on and so forth, we can do all that directly in these calculated fields. So already in 3 steps here. We've connected to data, we've pivoted it, we've cleaned it, and we've enriched it with 2 new columns. So the only thing left to do now is export it. In this case, I'm going to output it to a new Tableau data source. So let's go publish data source, project demo. Let's just call it a reactions. And as it saves, I'll just click publish. And so now we can take this flow, we can save it. Just put it in the demo spot. So now it's going to take this demo flow and we can click into that. And once this loads, gives us a little summary of what's going on in the flow. It tells us it has never been run. So we'll run this. Should just take a couple seconds here. Putting a lot of faith in Tableau Online right now. Pending run. Pending run. Slight dramatic pause. Still waiting.
Just real quick question for you, Chris, while we're waiting for this. So you're also using the dev instance, right? Like the Tableau developer program that Sam had kind of used, you're using the same type of
Exactly. Yep.
program,
This
right?
is the dev instance of Tableau Online.
Yeah.
And when I ran this morning, it only took 3 or 4 seconds for it to run.
No worries at all. Certainly don't
There we go.
worry. Okay, good.
Yep.
You're good. But I will say real quick, if you don't mind, Sarah in the chat said regex composition on the fly in public takes guts. So
Yeah,
definitely
so
impressing people.
you know my background with regex, right?
Yeah.
You've had to decouple some of my old expressions, I'm sure.
Yes.
So yeah, so it outputted. We have our new reactions data source. Here's the flow if we wanted to go into it. And now I'll just show, I'll expand a little bit more on that edit workbook functionality that Sam was showing to show how really crazy powerful it's gotten. The edit workbook has been around for a few versions now, but over the last, the most recent versions have seen an exponential increase in what you can do on it online. I remember when it first came out, it was really painful because you could only do like 10% of the things you wanted to do. You always had to download things and pull the workbook back down and publish it back up. So this is really to highlight what you can do with it now. So we'll connect to this this new reactions data source, and it really truly does feel like I'm in Tableau Desktop as I do this. So I'll just build a quick view here. We'll throw emoji on color, we'll throw it on label, we'll throw count on size. And again, here I'm doing things more to highlight what you can do, not necessarily that I need to do this for the view. So we can sort fields. So if we sort by size descending, we can edit color palettes. I never get to use fun and exciting color palettes, so let's throw some colors in there. Maybe make the heart red, just for kicks. So we can hide legends. We can basically do anything that you can do in desktop. I hesitate a little bit to say that because it's not 100% true, but it really feels like it. Let's call that emojis. And then let's do one more real quick. So let's throw emoji, reactor, count, throw that on color. Here we'll do a sort again, descending, field, and then sort on this guy. Turn off that header. turn off that legend, and then I'll just duplicate a dashboard and we'll pretty much be done. So let's start deleting stuff here. Throw in our emojis. Delete entire view. Put that down here. We can hide this title. You know, again, just kind of illustrating all the tiny little features that you don't necessarily think about when you're using them in desktop that you can do online here. And then turn that off. It even lets you set workbook actions or dashboard actions here. So we can do a filter. We can go from emojis to our sheet 14 and keep the filter. Let's rename this one to. We can even hide those little sheets. And let's publish this guy. So now if I close out of here and reload, should get our new dashboard coming in. And there we go. And what was, I may be slightly over time, but what was about 10 minutes, we connected to a data source, cleaned and transformed data, and built a new dashboard, a fully functioning dashboard, all in Tableau Server without having to download anything. So that is what I want to show off in terms of Tableau Online.
Absolutely wonderful, Chris. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
And what a fun dashboard. I think we all really like the colors and the emojis, and it's definitely fun use of data that you might not normally think of. So way to be creative. We do have a few questions, and I think we can spend a few minutes answering a few of them. And then what I'll do is just kind of ask that any questions that we don't get to, maybe you can respond to them afterwards.
Yeah.
So I think you kind of touched on this a little bit, but it's still a good question. Can you share what the benefit of working in server is versus desktop?
Really, the benefit is I don't have to download another copy of the workbook and go through it locally, save it locally. I don't have to go through the publishing steps to get it back to server. It's just a really powerful way to do it kind of on the fly. And if you were, say you're remoting into a computer and you have access to Tableau Server, but you don't have Tableau Desktop installed, or if you're waiting on your IT department to install it or update it or whatever, you can just do it right in the web as long as you have permissions to do so.
Awesome, thank you. Let's see, did you share this viz with your friends who were part of this chat?
Yes, of course I did. And it's actually really, it's really personal, obviously, so I won't be getting into it too much. But there's certain peaks and valleys that line up with our, life events, and it's really fun to dive into the specific messages, and if you knew the personalities of who was represented here, things would certainly mean a lot more.
Yeah. Do I know all of these people?
No comment.
Answered my question. Okay, let's see. So will Tableau Prep, so I'm going to kind of interpret this question, but basically the question is, will Tableau Prep ever show the underlying tables in the output? Basically, it sounds like this person joins multiple tables together with lots of fields. Each of them have lots of fields, and the output from Tableau Prep only shows one huge list of fields. The only other option is to remove all the unused fields in Prep, which can be time consuming. I guess I kind of think of like, when you in Tableau Desktop, when you like join together multiple tables and Tableau puts them into like folders, can Tableau Prep do something similar to that?
That's a really good question. I'm not actually sure of that off the top of my head. I would have to experiment with the joining functionality a little bit more.
Yeah,
And the main use case that I've used the joining and union functionality has been to work with things that are already published and already pretty curated, so that I didn't have to create a new set off of the raw underlying tables. So that's something I would have to look into.
gotcha. Well, thank you so much. And thank you so much for taking the time to present to us. This was absolutely fantastic. Who knew that Tableau Online or Tableau Server could do so much? So wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah, happy to.
With that, we're going to turn it over to our third presenter of the day. Olivia Butler is going to be doing kind of an advanced site administrator session. And even if you're not a site administrator, or even server administrator, I think you're going to stick around because it's really important, even as a user of Tableau and like a viewer of Tableau server stuff, it's really, really helpful to know what's possible. And then you can start to really bother your server and site admins to like turn these features on. So stay with us, but I'm going to turn it over to Olivia.
Good afternoon, everybody. I had to check the time. I am Olivia Butler. I am the data management liaison for the Wisconsin Department of Health Services. And as a part of my role at DHS, I also serve as our Tableau site administrator and a role that we created called the department publisher. So I'm also responsible for getting our content public facing. And I'm here today to talk about site administration. And to begin, I'm trying to minimize here. I want to start with a couple of caveats before we go too far, because site administration really depends on your server and your organization. The server administrator at your organization is going to be responsible for general server level settings. Your site administrator is going to be responsible for creating your projects to organize your content, assigning content permissions, monitoring the site metrics. So how many users are hitting your views, are your jobs running on task, and also troubleshooting any issues that come up within your site. So everything in the site administrator role really depends on a couple of caveats. The first is, what does your server look like? If you are using Tableau Online, you are using a client access license for Tableau Online, which means that each user in your department is going to have a specific license that will determine their site role on the server environment. You could also be using a core-based server like we use at DHS, which means that it's based on the number of cores and we have unlimited users. So our permission management becomes extremely important because the site role and the permissions that are assigned to a user are determined by our AD group, our Active Directory groups, and not by the license that they have purchased. Where your server is located, is it inside or outside of your firewall? That's going to change the policies, procedures, standards, and guidelines, or PPSG as we like to call them, for those servers and how you're managing as a site administrator that location. How your server is architected. If you're using a lot of nested project folders, you're going to have to allocate a lot more time to permission content management than if you're using a flattened structure. Whether you're on a multi-tenant site or you have a single site and your business areas are each participating on their own site, that all will play into what your role really needs to be. And then obviously, if you have additional add-ons, like we just looked at the Prep Conductor add-on, the data management add-on earlier, those would add additional complexity to things you would need to manage. At DHS, like I said, we have a core-based server, which means unlimited users, but we are a multi-tenant server. So the other state agencies at the state participate on the same server that we do, which means DHS has its own site. And then we use project folders to differentiate content, business areas, data sources, et cetera, within our site on this multi-tenant server. Your organizations are also going to be different. So at DHS, we work with highly sensitive data. A lot of it is statutorily protected, either at the local, federal, or state level. And we also have a very federated approach to our data here. So we have most of our business areas owning our data. We're not managing data sources on server in a centralized location, which also means as a site admin, I don't have credentials into most of the data sources that are feeding our Tableau content, which makes troubleshooting a little bit different as a site administrator in that type of environment. You also need to consider your organizational goals and your data culture. If you have a lot of users that are going to be accessing your site directly on server and using that web edit functionality that we just saw demonstrated, you're going to, as a site admin, need to be monitoring more actively how those users are accessing their content and making sure that people are following the rules of your environment. If you have more users that maybe are less data literate that are viewing content but not editing or publishing that content, those users may feel more comfortable if you're not sending them directly to server, and that you're embedding that content in the applications that they're already using. So in that case, as a site admin, you're going to need to do more working with how users are getting to that content and making sure that the embed and the public facing guest account is enabled and that they can see the content when they need it, or that the right people have permissions to the right content for making their decisions on a day-to-day basis. So with that being said, I want to talk a little bit about sites versus projects, because I feel like this is a conversation, we're talking at the site admin level, but how you organize your organization server is really going to depend on what your needs are, as we discussed. You should use sites when you're separating internal content from one another, especially sensitive content, because it doesn't allow for cross-pollination between those two sites, which means site A is mutually exclusive from site B. It also helps in a multi-tenancy environment to do the same thing so that business area A can't see business area B's content and vice versa. And you also want to use sites when you need to strictly control access, whether that's because your data is sensitive or you're not planning on sharing publicly. That really is where a site comes in, is best utilized. You want to use projects when you're separating development or testing from production content. This is a general best practice that a lot of people recommend. I will tell you that in the DHS environment, we have run into issues keeping our UAT development section on the same area as our prod site because of the way we set up our project folder. But it does make migration a lot more difficult if you're using sites to differentiate between a UAT environment and a production environment, because you will have to download and republish that content between the sites since they don't talk to each other. So if you're in an environment where you're less concerned about data sensitivity, or you really want to enable more self-service analytics, using project folders to delineate between a production and a testing environment is sufficient. And it makes it a lot easier to migrate that content to production once you finish your testing. You also want to use projects for self-service access without administrator privileges. If you don't want to open up administrator level rights to your site to a large amount of people, setting project folders and identifying project owners will allow your users to have more direct control over their content without having to grant them that full administrator level access. And you can use them when security is less of a concern. Like I said, you can cross-pollinate between projects. So if you have a user that moves their dashboard from project A to from development to production, you might potentially bring along UAT permissions, or you might not know that that content has been moved and enabled with guest account as a site administrator. You really want to keep track of what you've got live at all times. So when you're starting to build your survey, and I say this a lot in a lot of my talks, you should always start from the end first. You should think about what your organizational goals are. You should think about how your server is structured, and you should really make a long-term plan for your permissions. You want to make sure that you're removing any permissions that might cause ambiguity in your server. You don't want a user to be in 5 separate groups. You want them to be in one group, so that if they offboard and you need to take them out or modify their permissions in any way, you're modifying them once instead of multiple times. But it really all depends on what layout is best for your users to access your server. So once you've got your permissions planned, you also have to think about the fact that permissions are set from the project level all the way down to the view level. So I've included an image at the bottom of this slide today, but it really is about, you're setting who can see the project, who can edit the workbooks, who can edit the views, who can edit the data sources, the roles, the flows, the metrics, all of these different levels. You can individualize your permissions. So creating groups will help you manage how your permissions are applied at the project folder level on your site. I never recommend to set permissions individually. That gets messy really fast. So setting groups is a really good way to make sure that as a site administrator, you can keep track of who is accessing what content when, and make sure that you can manage that onboarding and offboarding process for your users really simply. At DHS, we only use 2 groups. We use a viewer group for anybody who needs to see the content, but not edit or publish that content. And we use a developer group to distinguish between our developers and our publishers, because our developers have publisher rights in our UAT environments, but not in our production environments. And then we've identified a handful of publishers for each of our projects that have the ability to publish to either of our production environments. That really sets you up to be able to use the site role in conjunction with the permissions that are being assigned at all these levels in a managed way, and keep everybody organized and not lose track of who has access to what. And finally, you want to build your projects. You should always check your default project folder permissions first, because whatever new projects you create will inherit the permissions from that default project folder. I also generally recommend when you're building projects to consider keeping them flatter. The more nested projects you have, the harder it's going to be to make sure that you have the permissions appropriately assigned to every subfolder that's nested under those top parent level folders. And I also recommend that you lock permissions. Unlocking permissions can sometimes give users more flexibility if you're really focused on that self-service analytics environment. But as a site admin, it's our nightmare. Because as soon as you unlock permissions and allow people to randomly assign permissions, you will lose control of your server pretty quickly if you're not regularly auditing who is accessing what content is available, and who has access to that content. So a couple of additional best practices, some of which we've already started with. You need to make sure you have well-defined PPSG. That's your policies, procedures, standards, and guidelines. If you as a site admin are trying to manage your environment, it is a lot easier to make sure that your users have the skills and the knowledge that they need to participate in that environment and follow the rules that you've established for your organization, rather than trying to give them that skills and knowledge after they've already been using server for a while. You also want to automate whenever you can. Removing manual work is always great. Your users will appreciate it. And you have the ability as an admin to prioritize extract schedules. I find that this is often a piece of Tableau Server that is not well utilized. If you have a lot of jobs running at a specific time, or you know that you have both external and internal jobs running simultaneously, you want to prioritize those that are external facing, those that take longer, or maybe depending on your organization, you want to get all of your small jobs done fast and then give it more resources to handle your bigger data sets. Utilize subscriptions. This is a two-way street. If you overutilize subscriptions, you are going to slow down the VizQL process and server that renders your visualizations. Your server is going to slow down. It's going to take longer to run jobs. But if you utilize subscriptions appropriately, especially when you've noticed you have high traffic times, either on your server or your web pages where your content is embedded, you can utilize subscriptions to force your visualization cache to clear, which will make sure that it's updating with that new data that's running. And also subscriptions obviously can send emails to individuals to notify them that the data is updated for the day. So as a site administrator, that's a really good way for you to keep people from going directly to your server, hitting that server during high traffic times. Instead, you're sending them an email and they can look at it locally. Then I also recommend that you, before you start putting content on server, you give your content a shelf life. We also don't think about this enough, but your server will be fine until you have 500 workbooks and you're trying to figure out which one is the one that's embedded and which one is the one that's being used internally. And you're trying to figure out, you know, does this content owner still work here? Do you have the right permissions to the data source? So just setting up a retention lifecycle for your content will not only make sure that you don't have stale content out on your server, that's bogging down those server processes unnecessarily, but it will also make sure that you're, you know, regularly, you're making this a living tool the way it was intended to be in the first place. It's not meant to just, you know, hold that report for 10 years. It wants to update, it wants to make data come alive, and making sure that you have retention policies in place is a really good way to help encourage that with your business users as well. Troubleshooting is a difficult topic and we don't have a ton of time today, so I'm going to kind of high level where you should go if something's broken first. As we talked about earlier, you get alerts if you're the data owner in DHS because we have a federated approach to our data sources. That means as a site admin, I don't get alerts that my data has failed to run, which means that I have to put in additional processes in place to make sure that I'm regularly auditing the pass-through credentials for the automated data sources, that I'm watching the tasks on my server very frequently to make sure that none of the jobs are failing, because I'm not going to get those notifications because I don't own the data. If you're running into issues with content that is embedded or that you've shared or that people are having trouble access with, you always start by verifying that the permission level is appropriate. That means a lot of different things depending on how your environment is structured, but you need to make sure that the user has permissions to all of those levels that we talked about, from the project to the view. You need to make sure that somebody didn't accidentally write over with a different level permissions. So for example, if I as a site admin publish content and my publisher wants to web edit that content, they're not able to publish back over that server version because they have lower level permission rights in server than I do as a site admin. You also want to make sure that you're encouraging your users to inherit project folder permissions if you're operating with your projects controlling those groups and permissions, because you can change permissions locally on your desktop copy before you publish it up. As a site admin, I'd recommend best practice is always inherit the default project folder permissions. It saves a lot of time troubleshooting, trying to figure out where something got disabled. And you also need to make sure that your content is enabled for the level of access that you're trying to share it with. Then you move to the data source and you do the same amount of troubleshooting. You make sure that your credentials are working, that your backend server or other data storage location is running. You want to make sure that you've embedded credentials for things that have guest account turned on for them. Those embedded if you try and prompt user for guest account, obviously your general public audience should not have your SQL Server password and access. So it's not going to let them access your content if you haven't embedded those credentials for automated data sources. You also want to check the workbook locally. As we mentioned before, it gets complicated sometimes if you've got some users web editing, some users who are editing content locally. You always want to make sure that the local copy hasn't been corrupted, especially for instances where it's connected to a non-server data source. And then finally, you want to move to your embed code and make sure that the embed code JavaScript is still functioning appropriately, that you have not changed names on anything that would have broken that embed code. And you can, this is kind of like a general high level approach to how you would work through troubleshooting, either a workbook going down or a data source failing to connect. And with that, I've got a couple of resources so I can share this slide later, but if anybody has any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Thank you so much, Olivia. That was just wonderful. And if you're not a site admin or a server admin, you know, a lot of this probably goes right over your head. And I feel like there's so many things. I'm a site admin. I've been a site admin for 6 years, and there's things that like Olivia's talking about that like I don't do and like I didn't know about, because again, everybody's environment is different, and it really is gonna, like, you need to figure out what works for you. And I think that that's really important. So I love that you talked about that process and really being thoughtful and thinking about how your firm wants to use Tableau Server and Tableau Online before you start setting up your projects and stuff. And things like that. But awesome caveats and things to call out, Olivia. Thank you so much. We do have a few questions rolling in, so I'm going to throw a few out at you, but we don't have that much time. So let's do that, and then we'll turn it over to our final presenter. So can you embed an entire site inside of an application? Do you know if that's possible?
I am not aware of how to embed an entire site. I am not going to say it's not possible because I'm constantly learning new things. But I also find that generally you're not going to want to embed your entire site.
Mhm.
There's a lot of different ways you can get around this. So depending on your application, you could embed multiple workbooks into a single view and use the view to display thumbnails of those workbooks in your application. There are also ways around embedding where you can provide single links to all of that content, like on an intranet site. You could provide links to all of your published content on server or things in prod. But I'm not aware of a way to put an entire site into your application. There is a URL, so theoretically, you could do some hardcore coding to put it in there, but I'm not sure how I would go about that.
Yeah, exactly. Well, thank you so much. We probably need to move on to our last presenter because we only have a few minutes left, but there are some questions in the Q&A panel. If you don't mind responding
I will
to them, that'd be
respond.
fantastic. Thank
Yep,
you.
of course. Thank you, guys.
And over to our final presenter of the day, Ethan, comes to us from Kansas City, right?
Kansas City, yeah, it's good to be
Yeah.
here. Got to
Awesome.
represent Midwest. It's great.
Yeah, exactly. We'll call this the Midwest Tableau user group. But thank you so much, Ethan, for joining us today. And you're going to cover some server admin stuff, kind of wrapping up this whole Tableau server for all sorts of skill levels. So take it away.
Perfect. Well, yeah, again, I just want to thank Brandy, Patrick, the other leads for inviting me. Really excited to be here. And more importantly, I want to thank the entire audience. I know your time's valuable, so we really appreciate you joining us this afternoon and listening to what we have to say. Hopefully it's provided you some value. I know the other speakers have provided me some value, so hopefully I can in turn do the same for you guys. But let's go ahead and kick it off. A little bit about myself. My name is Ethan Lang. I'm the Senior Manager of Analytics Engineering at Playfair Data. I'm also a co-lead of the Veterans Advocacy Tableau User Group. We're a small group right now, and we're kind of led by veterans. I'm a veteran myself, and our mission is really to help veterans in the Tableau community by providing a community where they can network or find a mentor or maybe break into the data industry. So it's a unique group. Definitely invite you guys to come and join us as well. We're full virtual. I'm also a member of the Tableau Speaker Bureau. So this is something that Tableau started last year, where essentially it's just a group of community or members of the community that have kind of volunteered to speak at certain events. So Tableau can call upon us to speak at the conference or a Tableau user group or a very local small event for public or PR purposes. But let's jump into the content. So before I start talking about how to build custom admin views where you kind of monitor different things that are going on within your server, I do want to touch base on what Tableau currently has just out of the box natively in Tableau Server for admins and site admins to view user interaction within the server. So I'm going to touch base on three different dashboards that I have found helpful in the past. The first one is this performance of views. So with this dashboard, it really allows you to, you can filter on the view, the workbook, time range, and then of course the admins have access to filter between the different sites. Some of the uses here. So what I find most interesting about this one, you can come here and you can really start to learn what views are most popular within server. You can also start to learn when your peak views are taking place. So is that early morning when everyone gets into the office, or is it kind of fluid throughout the day? You can kind of monitor all that from this dashboard. The second dashboard that I've found helpful in the past is this actions by specific user. So again, some of the filtering options here, you can filter by user, the action that that user is taking on the server, the time range, and then admins or server admins can filter between sites. Some of the use cases for this one, you can find out who's logging in and when they're logging in. You can also start to kind of figure out and learn a little bit about your users as far as what extra features they're enrolling for within server. So, are they subscribing to subscriptions or publishing, downloading the content? Are they signing up for those alerts that Sam touched on earlier? All of those things you can find right here from this dashboard. The next that I found very helpful is the stats for load times. So some of the filters here, you can filter by view, the time range. You can also set a range to the load time by second. And some of the use cases for this dashboard, you can find out the average load time across your entire server, which I've always found a very interesting statistic. You can also find out the load time by each individual view. So this is a really important dashboard, in my opinion, to drive adoption within your organization on all of these different tools that we've built and developed for the business. What I've found in the past is even 5 seconds for some of those higher level executives can be an eternity. So being able to kind of identify those views and maybe make optimizations to reduce that load time is extremely valuable, and this view will help you do that. So some final thoughts on kind of the current Tableau dashboards that I just previewed. My first thought is, to tell a cohesive story, you really have to jump around those dashboards. You may have to go into one, find out something. There's no easy way to kind of tell that cohesive story within one view. My second thought on these is the limitations to access from server. So as a creator role or a developer, you might not have access to these views. So you can't even see how the users, the end users for your tool, are interacting without pairing up with the site admin or server admin. And 3, there's a lack of customization. So you can't do custom branding. The visuals are very basic. Kind of the rule of thumb I've always liked to touch base on is, if the CEO of your company asks you to print off the load times from your server, I doubt you would print this off and stick this on their desk. It's just not very appealing, and it doesn't tell that story. So with that, how do we create custom views that are a bit more appealing? We can manage the permissions to those and maybe even allow some other users within the organization to preview those admin views. But more importantly, drive adoption. So the first step in that is creating a user that can access that data. So Tableau has two user types that can access those repository databases that hold all that historical data of all the events that take place on your server. The first user type is this Tableau user. So the Tableau user has very special permissions to view a subset of tables within that repository. What makes this user type unique is those tables that it has access to, Tableau actually makes an effort to limit the changes on those views and those tables. So if you were to build a custom view with those, they're less likely to break or fail or need updating. So they're a little bit more manageable. The second user type is this read-only user. So this user has access to a large number of those tables. I think it's over 300 plus different tables to be exact. These tables and views, though, are intended to support the functionality of the server itself. So Tableau might change those tables or views without warning. And if they do, it could break whatever you've built. However, Tableau does recommend, if you were to build custom views, to use this read-only access. The reason being is the tables that are built natively within Tableau are what the Tableau user would have access to. So you're not going to really expand on what you already see. This read-only user has access to a lot more data, so you can really start expanding out, telling that cohesive story, and again, driving adoption of these tools. So the first step that you need to do to create these users, or to create the read-only user to be exact, is one, verify that the port on your server is open, the 8060 port is open. This is a requirement if you're trying to connect remotely. The second step is to enable that repository access to that read-only user. And you can do that by running the following command. This is going to enable that access, and it's going to enable the access to the read-only user. You're also going to give that user a password. And I did want to put this as a disclaimer, but if later you decide that you want to disable this access to the server, you can run the following command, and it will close that access off. Now, once the server admin runs those commands, and I say the server admin runs those commands because at this point, you could really turn the reins over to your site admin or your creator roles or developers. They can jump over to Tableau Desktop at this point and connect these databases using the following connection. So you would type in your server URL, you would specify that 8060 port, and your database is specified as workgroup within these repository databases. Afterwards, your sign-in information, you're just going to authenticate as a username and password, and then you're going to enter that read-only user in the password you assigned in the last step. So from here, once you make the connection, you're going to find, again, like I said, there's, I think, over 300 plus tables you can connect to. There's a lot of data. To make it easier for the users and folks that are trying to do this, Tableau has built out this data dictionary, and I'll post this link in the chat. But this lists out every table and view. It also breaks it out by what the read-only user has access to and what the Tableau user has access to. So again, you can kind of use this data dictionary to do a little bit of investigative work to find out which user better fits your role or what you're trying to do within the server or with these custom views. To take it a step further, you can even click on these table names or views, and Tableau will give you all of the measures and dimensions in that table or view, the data type, and a brief description of what that measure or dimension is. So at this point, you can either really break off and start designing and building out your custom views on your own, or again, the Tableau community is just so helpful. There's a lot of community members that have built out templates for these custom views where you can actually go download the workbook and make your connection to your data, and your data will just flow into these templates, and you're automatically up and running. The great thing about these is not only have they already done some of that investigative work to see which tables and views are worth connecting to get this data, but it's also a great place to just start like a foundation and building upon those views. So to kind of preview that, I've stuck a couple screenshots in here. I'll just kind of quickly go through, but you can already see a lot of these are a little bit more modern than what you would see in those custom views. They really gets down into a lot more detail and starts to tell more cohesive story where you can kind of see all those statistics in one spot. And I do want to call out one main author and a link to this community page. So Mark Jackson, I found that a lot of these Tableau templates were authored by him. And if you follow this link, again, he even has those workbooks loaded up into the community forums where you have to simply just download the workbook, make the connection to your data, and you can start building out these custom admin views. But that's all I wanted to present today. I do want to leave a little bit of my contact information here. So if you have any further questions, happy to answer them. I know we're close to time, so I won't be able to get to all the questions, but feel free to reach out to me via email at ethan@playfairdata.com. You can also follow me on Twitter. There's my handle. And feel free to connect to me on LinkedIn. I really want to grow my network up here. So yeah, any questions?
Thank you so much. So far, there's not any questions that have come in, so I'm going to give people a second. Oh, we've got one in the chat. Does Tableau offer any tools that show the server performance throughout the day, like CPU usage?
I am pretty sure that that's a part of the admin views that the server admin would have access to, so you can see stuff like that. And that's just built in natively within the server.
I just posted the link to the data dictionary. I use it all the time. Ethan's link actually had like the different version in the URL. So like, you know, as you upgrade Tableau, you may have different fields and different tables available. So make sure that you're using the version that you're on. So basically, if you're on, let's say, version 2020.4, I don't know why, you'll replace the word current in the URL with the 2020.4, and that'll take you to your version of the data dictionary. Anyway, the data dictionary, though, it's really great because it's like this one big long like web page, and you can do like a control F or like do a find on that web page to find keywords. So if you're like, how do I find out usage, or how do I find out permissions, or what table, like, you know, sometimes that's the way I actually do like get started. If I don't know what table, I mean, there's 300 tables, right? Like, I'm not going to look at every single one of them. So I'll just do a find on that webpage. But this was fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing kind of what's possible. And thank you so much for your service, Ethan.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah, for sure. It was great to be here with you guys. And again, I'm happy to come in and talk again sometime.
I appreciate that so much. I definitely see like a friendship forming here. So thank you so much. And thank you to all of our presenters for taking the time today to come and speak with us. I mean, I don't know about you, but I'm coming away with a lot of wonderful takeaways, things that I'm going to learn and dig into. So just a reminder, we do have some upcoming meetings. Both the Madison and Milwaukee Tableau user groups have their own separate meetings. And I posted the links to them in the chat. So you'll need to scroll up a little bit, but you'll find our upcoming meetings in those links. We also have the Tableau Conference coming up, I want to say in like 3 weeks. It's free, it's virtual. Again, I've included the link in that post that I made a while ago, so go and check that out. I guess there's so many cool things. I mean, it's broadcast across time zones in multiple languages. You've got brain dates where you can chat one-on-one or in a small group with other attendees. Tableau Doctor, if you need help on something. Iron Viz, where you can see like the art of what's possible. So many crazy things. A dedicated Slack space so you can like chat with attendees. Just absolutely wonderful. Go and check it out. I'll be there in attendance. It'll be fun. We also are giving away some prizes to people who have registered for the event today. Patrick, do you have any update there?
Yeah, we're short on time, so I didn't know if you wanted to do the wheel.
I feel like, yeah, if we are kind of short on time, which I know is tough, and I always hate going over, but I will say I love when we're short on time because it means that you guys asked good questions, that we had awesome presentations, and I would rather hear from other people than have you listen to me. So, I guess, Patrick, if you want, we can just simply say that you'll be reaching out to people who have won.
Yep.
Thank you so much. And with that, that's the end of our meeting. Thank you guys so much for joining us today, and thank you to all of our presenters. It's just wonderful, wonderful content. Definitely keep in touch with either the Milwaukee or Madison Tableau user groups. We both have our kind of separate contact information. Reach out if you want to present. We'd love to work with you on like some topics that we're thinking about that we think our members might be interested in. And thank you, yes, again, to all of our presenters today. It was absolutely wonderful. Thank you guys so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Have a great day, everyone.
Have a great day.